In this video, we're going to show you how to replace the ignition coils on your Ford 500 located on the top side of your engine. Now we're working on the V6 application of our Ford 500. On this side of the engine, we have 3 ignition coils, the other 3 on the back side or underside of our intake manifold. What we're going to be doing on the back side is we're going to remove the bolt, the 8mm bolt, disconnect the electrical connector, and pull the ignition coil out. Let's go ahead and start working on the back ones. Using an 8mm wrench or a socket, go ahead and loosen the nut on the ground terminal. Once that's loose, give it a little wiggle and work that off. Using your 15mm socket, go ahead and loosen and remove this bolt. On the top of your strut tower brace, we're going to loosen and remove the 2 15/16 bolts on the driver's side and repeat the process for the passenger side. Once you have all the bolts out, we can go ahead and grab that cross brace and remove it from the vehicle. When you use a flathead screwdriver, loosen the hose clamp on the back end here of the air intake tube going to the throttle body. Once that's loose, let's come on over here to the vacuum tube, and there's a little green clip. We're going to just bring that back. It's kind of a spring-loaded clip. We're going to pull that and lift that off. There's another vacuum tube right here going to the intake tube. Simply pull that out. Set that aside. Our mass airflow sensor has an electrical connector right here. On the bottom side, there's a little red clip. It's a lock. You can normally just put your finger underneath that and pull that up, unlock it, and underneath the lock is a little spring clip or button. You press on that and unlock it. So this is the unit right here. On the air box right here, just undo the 2 clips, pull that up and out, and pull that off of the throttle body at the other end. And go ahead and set this aside. On the side of your throttle body here, there's an electrical connector similar to the mass airflow. I want to go ahead and press that red lock down. Push on that button right here and disconnect. On the bottom side right here, we're going to have a vent tube. Pop that off like so. Rest that down. On the top of the throttle body, you have your PCV tube right here. There's a little green clip similar to the other one that we popped off of the intake tube. I'm going to push that over and pull that off. On the top, I'm going to use a pair of pliers, loosen up that hose clamp, slide that back. I'm just going to use my pliers here and gently twist that hose just to break it free. And then we can slide that off. Now this is a coolant tube. You might experience a little bit of antifreeze coming out of this here. However, it is one of the highest points on the engine, so you have a good chance of not having any coolant coming out of that. On the back side here, we have this vacuum port here, and there's a clip on the back. We're going to use our pick. And what you gently have to do is I'm going to gently pull out on it to apply some pressure. And you push out on the clips on each side. It's almost like a horseshoe. you get that released, slide that off like so. We have our vacuum tube here from our brake booster coming to the back side of the intake. There's a metal hose clamp here. I'm going to use our needle nose pliers to get around the back. I'm going to open that up and pull that hose off. I'm going to switch over to our regular pliers here because we're able to reposition those clips. Slide that back, loosen that hose, and work that off. Using our trim tool, we're going to release this plastic retainer holding this hose to the back side here. Set that aside. Now on the bottom side of our throttle body, there's a coolant tube. It's this little guy right here, and it clamps on the bottom side of the throttle body. Instead of getting in there and struggling to get that, we're going to come on over here to our thermostat housing. Now there's coolant in here, so you want to be careful. Maybe have a catch can underneath the vehicle. I'm going to loosen that. You might lose a little bit of coolant. I'm going to pop that off, and I'm going to put a plug in here. That way there, when we pull that intake off, we don't have coolant from our throttle body system leaking out everywhere. Use 8mm socket, disconnect the terminal on the positive side of the battery. Loosen up the block, the retainer block for your battery hold down. Using your 8mm socket. Remove that block. Let's go ahead and remove the battery from the vehicle. Use my trim tool to disconnect the cable retainer buttons here. Using a 10mm socket, let's go ahead and loosen and remove the bolts holding the battery tray in place. Once those are out, remove the tray. Now we're going to access the EGR tube on the bottom side. It's a metal tube, and we're using an 1 1/16 wrench on the nut side of it. You want to loosen this. I'm going to put my hand down underneath and finish unthreading that EGR tube. All right. Our fuel line runs beside the passenger side of the intake, and it has a little plastic retainer clip here. We're just going to use our trim tool and simply undo the little plastic retainer from the intake. Our upper intake manifold has 8mm bolts securing it. There's 4 across the front here, and then there's 1 over here. You can access 2 more through these ports, and then there's 1 over here. Let's go ahead and loosen and remove those. With those bolts loose, I'm going to go ahead and lift up on this intake. rock it back and forth to break that free. Let's go ahead and disconnect the electrical connector here to the fuel rail. I'm going to press in on this little tab and pull that off. On the front side, we have a safety clip. I'm going to pop this off. Now press in on this clip on the back side and pull that off. We're going to use our 8mm. I'm going to go ahead and undo that bolt. We're going to use our 18mm wrench to remove this line connector. Just loosen this. The reason why we're removing this line here, or undoing it and moving it, is that way there we can get the intake with the fuel pressure regulator up and out of the way. Right now it's hitting that line. This line has a little metal retainer clip, so as we're undoing this, we can undo this clip on the side. On the front side, we have this bulkhead connector. I want to disconnect that one as well. At this point here, grab that intake, lift it up and out. Once we have access to our coils here, I'm just going to go ahead and use our 8mm socket and our ratchet. Spin that bolt out, set it aside. On the back side here, I'm just going to press down on a little clip on the back and wiggle this off. Wiggle that coil out. If you're replacing the ignition coils, now's a good time to replace the spark plugs. We applied a little bit of dielectric grease to our boot. I'm going to slide this down inside. Press it down on top of the plug. Reinstall the bolt. Let's go ahead and snug this down with our ratchet. And once you feel that bolt bottom out, just give it a little bit more. It doesn't have to be anything crazy, you just need it to be snug. Grab your electrical connector, line that up, press that on. You'll hear it and feel it snap into place. You want to repeat this process for the other two. What I'm doing is I'm taking some towels here and I'm stuffing it into the ports on the engine. We don't want anything falling down inside here. I'm going to do this for all 6 ports. I'm going to use some spray solvent and clean up the face here of where the intake gaskets are going to seal. I'm going to do this around all 6 ports. Now on the bottom side of our intake here, we have our 6 ports. There are 6 intake gasket seals. Now what you want to do is inspect these seals. These are reusable. If yours are worn, or maybe if you have high mileage, simply just go ahead and replace these. You can get them from a local auto parts store. We're going to use a little bit of solvent on a towel here and just clean up around there, make sure that that seal is good inspect everything. After you've cleaned the motor, go ahead and pull your towels out. Don't forget to do this. You don't want to install the intake with the towels in there. Let's go ahead and fit our intake back on in there. Lower it down in a position. Check all of your hoses. At this point here, our intake is back in a position. Let's go ahead and start installing the bolts. Connect the bulkhead connector here. With all of the bolts started, I'm going to just bottom them out. I'm not going to tighten them. And we're going to torque down the intake bolts to 89 inch-pounds, not foot-pounds. 89 inch-pounds is what we want. And there's a pattern. So it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Install this line over here and bring that down in a position. Okay, so we're just going to snug that. We have our metal clip here. I want to go ahead and get that installed here. The hard line has an 8mm bolt on that little bracket on the back. Go ahead and get that started by hand. And go ahead and snug it down. Once that bolt bottoms out, that's pretty much it. You don't need to tighten it anymore. Now on the nut side up front, you just want to double check that, make sure that is snug. Now we have the connections here. We have our electrical connection. Press it on, you'll hear it and feel it snap in. Bring our fuel line over, press that down. That'll clip in, and you can install your safety lock here. It hooks in through the bottom first, and then you push it up and snap it onto the upper portion. I'm going to move down here to the EGR tube underneath. I want to reach down, grab the nut on that, and I'm going to get that started, threading into the bottom side of the EGR. Ours is spinning on nice and easy, so I'm going to thread that on as far as I can by hand, and then we'll come back and finish it up with that wrench. And you just want to make sure that that nut is on there nice and tight. Once that's on there, we can go ahead and start to hook up the rest of our tubes. On the top side of our throttle body here, we have some tubes to go ahead and hook up. Install this tube here. Come on back here to this tube right here. You basically push it on and it'll clip into place. That's right on the back side. You can hear it and feel it snap into place. If you follow that line back, you have the plastic retainer on the back side of the intake. Press that back in to lock that on. You come back over here. gonna hook up this vacuum tube here. Push that on, you'll just hear it snap into place. Just gonna tuck this hose aside. We have this side here. This hose comes from the brake booster, and it presses onto the back side. I'm gonna go ahead and use your pliers to go ahead and move this clamp down into position. Pop that hose on there. Now if we have our coolant tube from the bottom side of our throttle body, you can run that over. If you used a plug, go ahead and pop that out, slip that on. We have the electrical connector on the side of the throttle body here. Press it on, press that red locking clip in. Take our little vent tube here. Good. Clip that on right there like so. Install your battery tray. Tighten down the bolts. Install our little plastic buttons here for our battery cables. Go ahead and lower your battery into position. Install the battery block. Let's snug that down and grab that battery, just give it a little wiggle, make sure it's nice and tight. Install a positive terminal. Tighten that down. Install the upper intake air box here. Connect your hoses. Press that on, you'll hear it snap into place. Install your mass airflow sensor harness. Press that in, snap it in, and then press that lock in. Tighten the hose clamp on the intake tube. Install the strut tower cross brace. Install our horizontal mount bolt. Before we tighten that down, we're going to install the 4 bolts for the cross brace. Now before we tighten these down, you can see where the old marks are from where the washers had settled before. Just line up that cross brace and tighten these down. down the horizontal bolt. Let's go ahead and torque those down. Let's go ahead and torque down our horizontal bolt here to 35 foot-pounds. Torque down the cross brace bolts to 41 foot-pounds. Now that we have the cross brace and the mount bolt torqued, let's go ahead and connect the battery. Install the ground terminal. Use your 8mm socket to go ahead and snug this down. And once that nut bottoms out, just give it a couple more turns here. You want to make sure it's good and snug, but don't over tighten it. Give that terminal a wiggle, and you're all set.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.